What if I told you that without this one game, we might have never gotten Yokai Watch, Inazuma 11, or the Professor Layton games? That the success of a single title took a tiny team of developers and launched them into a powerhouse studio, and eventually working on legendary titles such as the Dragon Quest series. Specifically Dragon Quest VIII, one of the best-selling PS2 games of all time. And the wildest part is that this was the studio's first ever game after being formed. That game was none other than Dark Cloud, developed by Studio Level 5. Now, you've probably never played or maybe even heard of Dark Cloud, but it was successful enough to land in the PS2's Greatest Hits collection, and later became available as a downloadable classic on the PS4 and PS5 alongside its spiritual sequel, Dark Cloud 2. More on that later. Yet despite standing shoulder to shoulder with PlayStation legends like Jak and Daxter and the God of War series, Dark Cloud usually ends up being buried on a Hidden Gems list. And that sucks, because this game is a blend of so many interesting mechanics such as city building, dungeon crawling, weapon crafting, time travel, and resource management that it makes Dark Cloud one of the most ambitious games of its time. Back in the day, I used to watch every E3 hoping for a surprise Dark Cloud 3 announcement, until the event officially ended in 2023. Now, it's just another series fans meme about wanting, but never really expect to happen. Still, I can't help but keep my hopes up, with publishers revisiting classics and indie devs reviving the spirit of forgotten games. Who knows? And I wanted to highlight the Dark Cloud games as it's a really fascinating look on what happens when you commit to an idea, no matter how strange or bizarre it is. But to understand why these games matter, you need to hear Level 5's origin story first, because it's absolutely wild. Level 5, the studio behind Dark Cloud, didn't start as the powerhouse we know today. Back then, it was just 10 or 11 people led by director Akihiro Hino taking their very first shot at making a video game as a team. And it's no exaggeration to say that Dark Cloud was the reason this now legendary studio even exists. Before founding Level 5, Akihiro Hino was still working at his old company, Riverhill Soft. But then he would get an offer that would change everything. Sony Computer Entertainment approached him about developing a game for, at the time, their brand new console, the PlayStation 2. Hino took the deal, left Riversoft, and that decision gave birth to Level 5. Fun fact, the name Level 5 is a metaphor on how Level 5 was the highest mark Japanese students could get on their report cards, and how the studio wanted their games to reflect that level of quality. This ultimately meant that Dark Cloud wasn't just another launch title. It was a gamble. The studio's entire future hanging on whether this newly formed team could deliver. So now the question is, did they? The game kicks off with the group performing a ritual to unleash an ancient evil, led by a man named Flag, who wants to harness the evil for his own twisted goals. Watching over the ritual sequence was always so mesmerizing as a kid. I used to start new games all the time just to rewatch it. The timing with the choreography with the music is perfect here. It's creepy, it's mystical, it's hypnotic, and then, as the dance builds faster and faster, the cauldron erupts, and out comes the face of evil, the Dark Genie. I've gotta say, I love this design. Around this time, and even now, JRPG villains typically lean into being either some broodingly handsome man, or a towering demonic god. But the Dark Genie is a fun villain that flips that trope in both design and personality. His first act after being freed was to call out how hungry he was and then casually swallows a guy whole. It's pretty great. With the genie's immense power and Flag's ambition, the two form an unholy alliance that threatens the entire world. The scene then shifts to another group dancing in the mountainsides of Naroon Village, where our protagonist is celebrating a lively festival. Side note here, the music for this scene is amazingly catchy. I still listen to it in the car sometimes. But the celebration doesn't last as Flag and the Dark Genie appear overhead and within moments proceed to annihilate the village. You try to escape, but it's hopeless. The screen fades to black. But just when you think all is lost, you awaken before the Fairy King, who explains that Naroon's destruction was only the beginning. With the genie's return, monsters have grown more aggressive and his corruption spreads across the land. Yet, hope remains. Before the attack, the Fairy King sealed fragments of towns, peoples, buildings, even animals into magical spheres called Atla. He entrusts Toan with the Atlamilia, a jewel that lets him unlock the Atla and rebuild civilization. With it comes a mission: stop Flag and the Dark Genie before their chaos consumes the world. From there, Toan sets out, rebuilding towns, battling monsters, and slowly piecing together a broken world. The story may be simple, but don't let that fool you. The gameplay offers a surprising amount of depth. It's here you're introduced to one of the game's two major components: the dungeons. The dungeons are a procedurally generated maze packed with monsters, treasure chests, and most importantly, the Atla, the thing that you need to rebuild your town. But even if you find the exit, you can't leave without the key, which drops randomly from one of the roaming monsters. Depending on your luck, you might get it from the very first enemy you defeat, or the very last one. As for the combat itself, well, at its core, it's fairly simple. Aside from having a standard basic attack and a charge move, that's pretty much all you can do in terms of control. But it's compensated for by the sheer variety of monsters you encounter in this game. Something I noticed when I was playing is that not every enemy is equally dangerous, but every monster is dangerous in their own way. Some are strong simply by how aggressive they are and by the amount of damage they can deal, but some are dangerous because they themselves carry a unique property that can really screw you over, such as monsters that fly around making melee combat tricky, some that can teleport and lob projectiles at you, and there's even this thing. It managed to juke and jive me a couple of times. Because of this, I ended up building a monster compendium of sorts in my brain, where I would have to carefully consider how I would need to approach each monster. So don't let your guard down, these enemies will put you to the test. Like, look at this! This monster is dodging all my attacks, it's like I'm fighting a fucking Tekken player! This. But also, monsters won't be your only concern. While exploring dungeons, you also have to manage your thirst meter, the game's main resource mechanic. As time passes, it gradually drains, and once it hits zero, your health starts ticking down. That means you'll always need to keep bottles of water on hand or hope you stumble across a healing pond. On top of that, the game throws in some of the most punishing status ailments I've ever seen in a JRPG. If you don't have the right item, or get lucky with a random effect tile, then you're stuck dealing with brutal debuffs like poison, which slowly eats away at your health, goo, which forces you to crawl at a snail's pace, and curse, which straight up locks you to your current weapon, and more. These can end up turning a normal floor into an absolute nightmare, so trust me, always pack the soap when entering the dungeons. It's basically an essential. The most important item to keep on hand though has to be repair powder. Every time you strike with your weapon, it loses durability. If it reaches zero, the weapon breaks and is lost forever, except for your default starting weapon. Unlike other RPGs, Dark Cloud doesn't have a traditional leveling system. Instead, things like health and defense are raised by items, and your offensive abilities are purely scaled by your weapons. Your weapons are your lifeblood. From my experience, you'll usually need to repair your weapons at least twice per floor. So it's smart to carry multiple bags at all times, and a few backup weapons just in case. Because if your main weapon breaks mid-run, that's basically the same as resetting your character. Speaking of weapons, just like how there are a ton of unique monsters, the weapons in Dark Cloud show a lot of personality. There are high damage weapons that are extremely fragile, weapons that drain your thirst meter in exchange for more power, and weapons with built-in advantages against specific enemy types. And then there's some wildly wacky ones like Steve the talking slingshot, a massive frozen tuna, or a giant rusty nail. It's gonna kill you with tetanus. You can see the devs had a lot of fun making this game, and that playful energy is reflected in both designs of the monsters and in the weapons. But the real hook lies in the weapon evolution system. Each weapon gains experience, called abs for some reason, and once full, you can level it up to boost its stats. But by also adding attachments to increase specific stats like elemental damage or monster type effectiveness, you can veer the weapon's growth to evolve them into more powerful forms. Take the Gladius. You can evolve it in one of two ways, either the quick and nimble small sword, or you can get the more durable chopper. With 35 weapons just for Toan alone, half the fun is discovering what each one becomes. And this is where the system really grabbed me. It reminds me of advancing your job class in old school Korean MMORPGs. That rush of ascending to the next level and unlocking a whole new skill set. Every weapon chest, every evolution fills you with anticipation about what crazy thing you might unlock next. My favorite weapon has to be the Lamb Sword. It's a decent enough weapon at full durability, but when it drops low, it transforms into its wolf form, gaining a massive stat boost, forcing you to play on the edge for more power. This weapon system is genuinely one of my favorite mechanics in any game. It's what kept pulling me back into the dungeons, always chasing and building towards that next evolution. But hey, remember, Dark Cloud isn't just about dungeon crawling. Now I know what you're thinking. Actually, no, I don't. If I did know what you were thinking, I wouldn't be in the YouTube game. I'm in the YouTube game to tell you what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking, how the hell is building towns relevant to me fighting Mons? I mean, after all, if I wanted to play a town simulator, I could have just snagged a copy of The Sims from a cereal box. They used to do that, you know. The solution Dark Cloud came up with is actually pretty simple. All the materials for rebuilding your town come straight from the dungeon, and when you put the town back together, you're rewarded with useful stuff. Healing items, stat boosts, and most importantly, key quest items that let you keep progressing. It's a feedback loop that makes the two halves of the game feel relevant to one another. And placing the buildings themselves felt surprisingly therapeutic. I'm not ashamed to admit that I spent a lot of time thinking about how I was going to form my villages, trying to juggle between making all the villagers happy while also matching the feng shui of my imaginary town. It felt like putting together a diorama but with pre-made pieces. What's cool is that level 5 could have easily phoned it in here. You know, just let you slap down houses wherever and call it a day. And technically, you can do that. You could be a dick and just place every building haphazardly if you wanted. But here's the thing. Do you see this bar over here? Every resident has a specific preference for how they want their home restored. Maybe they want to live next to the river or far away from that one annoying neighbor. Fulfilling those requests unlock even better rewards. And when you 100% a town, you get a special reward. So there are incentives to care. I really like this extra step because it forces you to consciously map out how you want your overall town to look, effectively puzzle solving your way to completion. It's a gimmick that has so much depth to it that you'll find yourself getting lost over how to make the perfect town. And it never gets stale either. As the dungeons get tougher, the way you build your town also evolves. Each new region comes with unique challenges you need to play around. Take Mataki Village, a settlement that presides deep within the woods with a layout more complex than Naroon's. Here, not only do you need to restore the buildings back together, but you're also tasked with rebuilding the river system in order to revive the local forest spirit, Trent. As such, your entire settlement has to be built around this river. Each new region has its own gimmicks and rules that will challenge the way that you rebuild your town. My favorite is when you reach the moon settlement. Instead of rebuilding a typical village, buildings and landmarks are replaced with pieces of a mech suit that you need to construct in order to go fight the genie. The creativity here is wild, and it's what makes the Georama system so much more than just a side distraction. Dark Cloud was ambitious, messy, and full of ideas that shouldn't have worked together, but somehow did. They managed to balance two completely contrasting mechanics while making them both distinct and relevant to one another, all while throwing in their own creative twists. Sure, it had some rough edges, but for a game facing that much pressure, a new team, a completely new hardware, an insane concept, it blew past all expectations. So, what did Level 5 do next? Play it safe? Scale back? Go back to the drawing board? Neither. They doubled down. Dark Cloud proved that Level 5's crazy experiment could work. But when I played through the sequel, I couldn't shake this feeling that this wasn't a sequel at all. It was more so what the first game was trying to be, and we can look no further than the name of the game to see evidence of this. See, in the US release of the game, it was called Dark Cloud 2, as you expect. But in the Japanese and European release, it was under the name Dark Chronicle, which is pretty strange, right? Like, why would you change the name at all? The two games share the same universe, core game mechanics, and you can even see the return of some familiar faces. But despite that, the games aren't connected at all. In other words, the first game isn't canon towards the second. This is why at the beginning of the video, I referred to Dark Chronicle as the spiritual sequel to Dark Cloud, rather than a true sequel. But it still begs the question of why the game wasn't just named as a sequel to begin with. And I think it's because Level 5 wasn't just making a sequel, they were finishing what they started. In a 2003 RPG fan interview, director Akihiro Hino admitted, in a certain way, there is a point that we didn't create a complete version of Dark Cloud. After its completion, we said, let's do a new project. After we did Dark Cloud and thereby left something over to do, we said let's add elements so it becomes something entirely different and make this a big project. It wasn't just about making Dark Cloud better, it was about making it complete. This was a studio that had grown as developers, gained more resources, and most importantly, developed a clearer vision of how to execute their ambitious idea. And one of the first places where we see this growth is how the game treated its playable characters. See, Dark Cloud gives you a total of 6 playable characters, each one recruited at the different locations you restore along your journey. You would think with this large of a party there would be a lot of fun moments of them interacting and engaging with the story, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Let me compare 2 of your party members, Goro and Ruby. Goro is the son of a great hunter who died during an expedition. His father entered the forest with a team, but after encountering a legendary beast, he lost his life protecting the villagers. Goro grew up resenting the village as well as his father, who he felt has abandoned him, which explains Goro's hostility towards others. After defeating the beast, you reconnect Goro with his father's spirit, to which then the truth comes out. His father was dying from an illness and chose a warrior's death. Goro, angry at first, finally finds closure and vows to surpass his father as a warrior. This is how Goro joined the party. Nothing special, but hey, it works. Ruby is a mail order bride. I mean, that's what she is. After rebuilding the home of King, the mayor of Queens, yeah, it's a royal mouthful, he gifts you with the magic lamp housing Ruby. This is the first time you're introduced to Ruby, and after hearing your quest to defeat the Dark Genie, she decides to join your party. This is really all there is to this character. At least the other characters had some sort of build up to them, but this character just kind of suddenly appeared out of nowhere. And that's a real shame because Ruby is such a cool character. She shares a natural connection to the Dark Genie, being a genie herself. She shows no respect for authority despite being a genie. In fact, King, his crew, and even Toann are showed to be intimidated and a little scared of her. Like, Ruby is beyond cool, but she's never used properly because here's the kicker, once a party member joins the team, that is the last time you hear from them. This isn't just disappointing, it's jarring too. There's really only one moment after you recruit a party member where they actually speak, and like, just take a look for yourself. That's it, that's all you get. There's no interaction between the other party members, there's no scene of your party fighting together, there's not even a picture in the credits of what happened to them after beating the game. They simply stop existing after they join your team. Hell, the talking slingshot, Steve, has more dialogue than all of your party members. This inflatable two-man looking thing has more of a character arc than the cat that turned humanoid that it's being used by. What is this? Now compare that to Dark Chronicle. In this game, there are only two protagonists. Monica is a princess from the future out for vengeance against the people who murdered her father. And Max is a young boy from the present who's handy with machines, eager to explore the world beyond his small town, and driven by the mystery of his missing mother. You may have noticed that I stopped listing characters, and that's not by mistake. Unlike the giant roster of the first game, Max and Monica are all you get, and honestly, all that you need. These two work amazingly well together. They bounce off each other constantly. Monica drops knowledge about the future, and Max knows everyone in the present who can help. When problems come up, they're both actively figuring out solutions instead of just standing around, passively waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. And the presentation of these characters are only further enhanced with the addition of voice acting. Like seriously, take a listen. You may even recognize a few voices.
Always wear it, he said. It's pretty old. I don't know what it is. There's only one person who could have gotten past my defenses. Me.
Oh, we got an ornery son of a gun here. Come back for more, huh?
I sing it.
Why don't you tell me about it over a bowl of my famous centipede gumbo? Are you trying to stand up to my power with such a puny little fortress?
Look, Charlie, you've had a busy day. All this running around, all this excitement with Batman!
Now, having characters simply acknowledged throughout the game and interacting with each other was really all I ever wanted from the first game, but the sequel goes above and beyond to make their characters more expressive. And nowhere is this more impressive than in how the game uses boss fights for storytelling. There's a particular moment in the game where the enemy forces are bombarding an important figure needed to rebuild the future. It's here that Monica gets face to face with the person that killed her father, Gaspard. And while this fight could have been enough for a boss battle, they decided to also give Max a role in it as well. While Monica fights with Gaspard, Max is also busy fending off the flames and protecting the people inside. This fight alternates between Monica's fight with Gaspard and Max's effort to save the windmill. This is a really cool scene. First of all, to reiterate, this really could have just been a fight that centers on Gaspard and Monica, while Max could have been shown in the background or in a cutscene. But instead, they went the extra mile by alternating between both characters. It emphasizes the idea that they are a team, which is really important, because it was this fight that I finally got to see Monica as a proper protagonist, and not just another team member. You see, despite starting the game out as Monica, it's Max's perspective that we follow for the majority of the game. We follow him as he leaves to answer the call to adventure, and it's his voice that serves as the narrator for the game. With so much emphasis on Max being the character we follow, it's inevitable that Monica would just feel sidelined. But now, it feels as if the game is giving Monica and Max equal amounts of attention. In fact, there's a detail that I'm really fond of that can be seen in the weapons they carry. Monica's sword and Max's wrench obviously reflect their personalities. She's the headstrong warrior while he's the mechanical problem solver. But they also represent Dark Cloud's two core systems. The sword for the game's combat and the wrench for the Georama System. Everything about these two just fits together. I feel like an issue that I come across with games with a large cast of characters is that characters take turns in the spotlight, but here, with just Max and Monica, everything feels concentrated. They genuinely feel like dual protagonists rather than a main character with a sidekick. I'm engaged with Monica's goal of avenging her father, while simultaneously relating to Max as he explores the world beyond his town. And if it hasn't surprised you yet, the idea that this level of storytelling and symbolism is found in an early PS2 game is just wild to me. But Level 5's growth wasn't just about storytelling. I mean, after all, gameplay is arguably the most important feature in a game, and since one has a bigger roster than two, then by the logic of bigger number, one must be better than two, right? Wrong! The first game is very impressive in terms of sheer variety of enemies and weapons that keep combat engaging. But the combat itself isn't complex enough to justify 6 playable characters. With your move list being limited to your basic attacks and a charge move, there's a lot of overlap between the 6. Let me give you an example. Xiao, Ruby, and Osmond are all ranged characters that differ slightly. Ruby hits hard, Osmond can shoot while he moves, and Xiao sits in between. But the issue is that we have 3 ranged characters to choose from, all to kill bats and other flying monsters. Which I wouldn't really mind either if it wasn't for the fact that every character has their own dedicated weapon tree. A cool feature for sure, don't get me wrong, but it means in order to make each character viable at every stage in the game, you would need to sink an ungodly amount of time to grind out every weapon and farm for every material needed to evolve your weapon. Because of this reason, there were characters that I just straight up didn't bother leveling, because doing this for every character crossed the border between fun and work. And it's not like you can't kill flying monsters with melee characters either, it's just slightly easier to shoot them down. Which leads into my next issue. Why would you play anyone aside from Toan? The game highlights Toan as the most important character. And rightly so, after all, he's like the main guy, right? But because he's the only person who can interact with the Atla, if he dies mid-run without collecting all the Atla on that floor, you are forced to replay the level even if your other characters could easily clear it. Between that and him being able to handle 80% of the enemies easily, I rarely had any reason to switch off of him unless the game forced me to with roadblocks or character-specific floors. And that's a real shame because these characters feel inspired, but just ultimately unrealized. Outside their recruitment scenes, they function more like specialized tools than organic teammates. By the final boss, I've only fully maxed out 3 out of the 6's weapon trees, and barely touched some party members entirely. You'd think that this is why level 5 decided to scale back to just having Max and Monica in Dark Chronicle. But you'd be wrong. Instead of playing it safe, they got creative, which lucky for them was their specialty. Looking at Dark Chronicle's combat, both characters carry melee and ranged weapons. Max inherits Goro's blunt weapons and Osmond's guns, while Monica fuses Toan's swords with Ruby's magic. Given everything I stated about the first game, giving both characters melee and ranged weapons should make switching characters even more pointless. But the combat in Dark Chronicle is far more complex this time around. It keeps the insane enemy variety from the first game, but fights are faster and enemies don't get stun locked as easily. Your move list expands dramatically. Backflips, lunge attacks, ground finishers, combo cancels, and different weapons change your movesets entirely. As a result of fleshing out the combat, the game in turn becomes much harder. I can't tell you the amount of times I died in the sequel than I did in Dark Cloud 1. This was the type of complexity that I was looking for to justify switching characters in the first game, so that now, Max and Monica can develop into distinct roles. Max's wrench excels against slower, more durable enemies, and his gun gives him the best range damage in the game. And while Monica's magic can't compete with Max's gun in terms of damage, it can track enemies and her melee skills are unmatched. But just when you think you've mastered their playstyles, the game expands their abilities even further. Yes, Max and Monica are the only 2 playable characters, but they're not the only characters you can play. Later in the game, both our protagonists unlock a secondary form, where for Max, we see the return of Steve, but this time as a giant robot, and Monica unlocks monster transformations. Now the way that Steve works is really cool. Unlike the other characters who absorb experience and grow, Steve uses experience as currency that you can spend to get upgrades that range from things like weapons, chassis, mobility, and if you want, you can even unlock his signature ability of talking. Whether you want him to skate around with swords in both hands or fly around shooting rockets, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of customizing your robot. He's meant to be used to counter big enemy types, but really he can decimate pretty much any enemy in the game. But instead of a traditional health bar, he has an energy bar that gradually depletes as you use him, which serves to balance him out and prevent you from just playing as him. Then, unlike the destructive power that Max and Steve bring to the table, Monica and her monster transformations bring a more subtle speciality. Monica can obtain badges that allow her to transform into the various monsters you encounter on your journey. As a monster, you have access to all of their moves, and other monsters that are part of the same family will be friendly towards you, and you can even talk to them to get information and even items. It's a genuinely cool concept. Being able to transform and communicate with monsters opens up interesting exploration possibilities. But the thing is, it's almost entirely underutilized. Outside of that one mandatory story moment where you need to transform into a Himara to get the sun drop, I barely touched the system. As a combat mechanic, it's actually weaker than just playing as Monica. And with 10 different monster badges that you need to level separately, it becomes yet another system that sounds ambitious on paper, but feels like work in practice. It's the same problem that Dark Cloud 1 had with its character roster, just in a different form. Too many options that aren't rewarding enough to justify the investment. Now, I've talked about the transformations for Max and Monica, but some of you may have noticed a 5th character slot. This is Dark Cloud's so-called 3rd character, and who fills that slot is entirely up to you. Here's how it works. Instead of restoring villages like in the first game, you're building brand new ones from scratch, and recruiting villagers from the starting town to immigrate over. These villagers, from your wealthy father who demands a 3-story house, to the local baker that just needs a house made of bricks, they can all be recruited as support characters, with unique passive abilities. Some increase damage with specific weapons, others provide free heals mid-dungeon. The support character I always used was Borneo, available right after the first dungeon, whose ability guarantees a 100% item drop rate on monsters. This is what makes Dark Chronicles so cool. They solved the character problem without abandoning their ambition. Instead of just cutting the roster, they reimagined what a party member could be, while keeping the core cast small enough to develop properly. Sure, not every support character is equally useful, but every time I switched characters, it felt purposeful rather than redundant. I highlighted these moments to show just how much the studio grew between these two games. But I think the most damning piece of evidence of why I think Dark Chronicle feels more of a remake than a sequel to Dark Cloud is in the ending. Specifically around the characters, Cyrus and Sita. Before I continue any further, I just wanted to give a quick spoiler warning to the endings of the two games respectively, so proceed with that in mind. The story behind Cyrus and Sita are strikingly similar, as both are meant to represent the tragic and then redeemed hero. Starting off with Sita, while playing Dark Cloud 1, you may have noticed this Final Fantasy character lurking throughout the game. This is the true final boss of Dark Cloud. Kinda. In a rather disappointing turn of events, after what I can only call an epic kaiju-style battle with the Dark Genie and Flag, it's revealed that the Dark Genie we were familiar with was nothing more than a rat that managed to sneak into the seal and absorb too much energy. Which I just need to emphasize how disappointing this was for me. Like, this version of the Dark Genie has so much personality. Just look at him, he's smoking a cigar, menacingly. But instead, we get this generic evil anime guy. Anyways, Sita's identity is fully revealed towards the end of the game in a clever twist on the Georama system. Instead of building one final village, the Atla you unlock in the final dungeon contains pieces of a memory that you construct to reveal Sita's full backstory and the true origins of the Dark Genie. It's a neat idea in concept, but I'm sorry. I don't know if it's because I'm spoiled from the years of improvements from modern games, but I just can't get myself to care about something by reading pages of exposition and lore. I need someone with a slight baritone voice spending a f***ing hour reading all that quack for me to get invested. The TLDR is that 400 years ago, King Sita was at war with a neighboring kingdom and was losing until he turned to forbidden power, which helped him win the war, but he became too powerful that his own kingdom tried to kill him out of fear. But they f***ed up and killed his lover. Therefore, in his rage and sorrow, Sita's magic gave birth to the Dark Genie, an entity made up of all those things. And really, there's not much more I can say about this character. Other than him popping up once or twice throughout the game, his entire backstory gets dumped on you all at once towards the end. It feels incomplete, like having a burger without fries or cookies without milk. It's really hard for me to feel anything about this character. Now compare this to Cyrus in Dark Chronicle. He's also consumed by grief, blaming humanity for the loss of his friend, Queen Alexandria, and takes on the name Griffin to wage war from her old castle. But Dark Chronicle actually nails the execution. Instead of text dumps, you recreate the castle garden using paintings scattered across the walls as blueprints. This unlocks memories that show their actual relationship, giving you a real connection to these characters. And the clever part is you're incentivized to pay attention because buried in these memories is where you learn of Griffin's real name, which you need as a passcode later. This was the quote-unquote fries I wanted from the first game. It's active storytelling that keeps me engaged instead of dumping exposition. Using paintings as blueprints represents everything I love about the series, taking creative mechanics and finding new ways to keep them fresh. By earning these story moments through gameplay, I actually got invested in these characters. This is what I meant by level 5 showing a considerable amount of growth without abandoning their ambitions. The same concept as Sita, but executed in a way that fully brings out what they were going for, instead of feeling tagged along. And when you finally get to the boss fight, bro, this is next level. After abusing the powers of the Atlamelia, Cyrus transforms into Griffin, as we steel ourselves for his boss fight. His first form shows us how much power he has over the Atlamelia, hovering in the air, almost untouchable. But gradually, as we weaken him, memories of Alexandria's surface and his powers dwindle. The music shifts to something tragic and somber, matching the emotional buildup the game created throughout the garden sequence. You can see his final moments with Alexandria, him pleading for her to flee, her accepting her fate. Unable to accept Alexandria's death, Cyrus spirals. His final form, the power he hoarded, turns against him, corrupting his body, and eventually, from his hatred, the Dark Element is born. That's right. The name might be a little different, but make no mistake, the Dark Element is literally the Dark Genie. This is when everything clicked for me. Like, listen, when I played these games to make this video, I played them back to back, and as I was playing through Dark Chronicle, I just couldn't shake this feeling that this game was strikingly similar to its predecessor. And yes, I know how silly that sounds, the game is technically its sequel, but instead of a game that continues from Dark Cloud, it felt more like this was the game that Dark Cloud was trying to be. And so here, I was more willing to accept the Dark Element's sudden appearance because I'd experienced Cyrus's entire arc. And unlike Sita's hollow sacrifice, when Cyrus redeems himself and reunites with Alexandria, it feels earned. And that's what makes Level 5's approach so special. Its incredible ability to dedicate itself to an idea no matter how absurd until it creates diamonds from the rough. They didn't look at Dark Cloud's rough edges and think, let's play it safer next time. They thought, let's get weird again, but better. More ambitious mechanics, not fewer. Deeper systems, not simpler ones. They prove that the solution to imperfect innovation isn't abandonment, it's persistence. I think about this a lot when I look at modern game development. We've gotten incredible at polishing individual mechanics to perfection, but we've lost something in the process. When's the last time you played a game that tried to be that extra? When's the last time a studio risked everything on an idea that sounded absolutely insane on paper? There's something really special about these games that admittedly I can't all fit into one video. Like, I didn't even get to talk about Spheda, the metal challenges, or the fact that the Dark Genie from the first game is in Chronicle as a secret boss. Dark Cloud wasn't perfect. Hell, neither was Dark Chronicle. But they were willing to fail spectacularly in pursuit of something genuinely new. And in an industry that increasingly plays it safe with proven formulas, that kind of creative courage feels more valuable than ever. I still hope for a Dark Cloud 3 someday, not because I need more nostalgia, but because I want to see what happens when developers are brave enough to ask, what if we tried something completely ridiculous and then actually commit to finding out? If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around. And if you want to jump in for a conversation, let me know what games you think don't nearly get enough attention. And if you want more videos like this, well, you know where to find me. Take care.